And I want to start off just by thanking DePriest, who is the CEO of the Community Foundation for Northeast Georgia. As you know, DePriest and I, actually, we've known each other in Gwinnett for a very long time, wearing different hats at different times in our career. But in this current role, he has been incredibly supportive of the coalition and our work in the community. And I hope he feels the same support from us. But we continue to partner in ways that make sense and help our community grow and become stronger and more effective at serving our community residents. So he first brought this idea of, hey, I've got, Kim Hartsock, who is the vice chair for the Community Foundation for Northeast Georgia this year. And Kim had an idea about sharing some information about the Big Beautiful Bill Act. Because one of her partners in another state has done this with nonprofits there. And she said, wouldn't it be cool if we could do it in Gwinnett? And the priest said, hey, I think it'd be great. And they called Renee. And then here we are today. So I would just want to thank Kim and DePriest for thinking of the coalition. And I'm going to actually just turn it over to Kim, who is the managing, not only is she actually, she's wearing a few hats. Vice chair for the Community Foundation. She is the incoming chair of the board for the Gwinnett Chamber of Commerce. She probably has a lot of other things. I know she's a mom and she's a partner in life and all those things. But then today, I think importantly, she's going to introduce her colleague, Megan Randolph, who is going to give an account of the Big Beautiful Bill. So anyway, thank you, Kim, for joining us today and for providing the introduction.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you to Priest for connecting me with this group. So, good afternoon. Happy Monday to everyone. Happy Thanksgiving week. We're happy to be here today. And like Renee said, I am the regional managing partner for the Atlanta office of Warren Averett. We are a regional CPA firm. We have 13 offices in the Southeast. We are a top 50 CPA firm, and we go to market by being industry specialists. And so Megan Randolph is my colleague, my partner in our Birmingham office. She leads our 990 tax practice group, so handling all things federal and state grant related for nonprofit organizations. She also leads our tax department for the firm and sits on our operations board. So she is an expert in our tax world, and I am not. So I refer all things to Megan that relate to that. But I do work in our nonprofit group here in the Atlanta region, and like Renee said, serve on DePriest's board, and just a real fan of Gwinnett, and love what all of you do for our community. And thank you for all that you do for our community. And so wanted to just be able to give back in some small way and contribute to this meeting. And so, like Renee said, Megan had prepared a similar presentation for the Community Foundation there in Birmingham. And when I saw her little write-up about it, I thought, well, we could do that for all of our nonprofits in Gwinnett. And so I asked Megan to join us today. And thank you, Megan, for being with us today. And she is going to share all things that you would need to know about the Big Beautiful Bill as it relates to nonprofits. And if you saw it, it is a several hundred-page document. So I'm sure all of you have read all of it and know everything about it. But she's going to save you some time and give you the Cliff's Note version of that. And at the end, we can pause for any questions. But I've put my contact information in the chat, and DePriest and Renee would be happy to connect you with us if you have further questions that you want to dig into more details that are specific to your organization, or if you have some nuanced questions, we'll be happy to reconvene after this call. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Megan.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you guys for having me today. Kim did a great job of going over the things that I love to do in my profession. I've been doing this for about 20 years and specializing in nonprofits the entire time on the tax side. A lot of people think that there's not a lot of tax side for a nonprofit, but that is very much a misconception, because there's a lot of tax issues that face nonprofits, and especially in this bill. So we'll go over really the things that directly and indirectly affect nonprofits specifically. We won't get into some of the things that aren't really affecting nonprofits. And so it's still a lot of information. But if you've got questions, we would love to take those at the end. I'm going to make sure everybody can see my screen now. I am sharing Can everybody see?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, perfect. Um, as we got started, I was having some video problem, and all I could think was, I do not know how to work this computer. I know how to do taxes, and that's about it. And so I did not, and then magically my video started working. So very excited. So today we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna mainly focus on how this is affecting the nonprofits and how we even got to this act. Um, there was actually a good chance that nonprofits were going to be very, very, very highly impacted, and it was going to be a very scary thing. And a lot of those acts were within the original bill that passed the House. And so we'll talk a little bit about how the narrow misses at the end as well. Um, so kind of an overview. So on July 4th of 20.
Uh-oh, we lost your
Audio.
no, it came on. There it is.
Okay, it's back. It keeps
Yes.
muting.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. All right, I see.
Megan, I apologize. That was me. I apologize.
Oh,
Okay.
Not you this time.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll just start over because I'm not sure what you guys
Hello,
heard.
how are you today? Okay. Good.
That would be great. Okay. Keep our eye out for the right people. Thank you.
Okay. On July 4th of 2025, President Trump signed into law the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, now more commonly known as HR 1. Well, I think they're trying to get that off the ground, but frankly, has anybody heard it called anything better? I mean, other than One Big Beautiful Bill. It was a sweeping budget reconciliation bill that really reshaped the federal tax policy. While the legislation aims to extend and expand the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it also introduces several new provisions, both direct and indirect, that will significantly affect nonprofit organizations across the country. Importantly, and many controversial measures from earlier drafts, such as expanded taxes on nonprofit income and restrictions on tax-exempt status, were removed from the final bill, and that really sparing nonprofits from potentially severe operational and financial burdens. So there are a lot of direct items that are going to affect nonprofits. There's only a handful that actually were written specifically for nonprofits. If you look at the bill, the nonprofit section is very, very small. It's just a paragraph. However, with you guys all being nonprofits that are fundraising, that are focused on how you're going to keep these nonprofits going financially and out in the market, just trying to gather grants and raise dollars in general for your mission, there are a lot of very direct impacts from some of the other individual items as well as business items. Then we'll go over those in general. And then there are some indirect items that, while it may have nothing to do whatsoever seemingly with nonprofits, it will have an indirect impact on you guys in the end. And especially going into this giving season, I know that Giving Tuesday is coming up next week, and then a lot of you, I don't know if there's anyone from United Ways here. The blackout dates are over or almost over with United Way, and then we'll go into our giving season at the end of this year. So there's a lot of important stuff we can discuss there. One big thing that I find to be something that a lot of people are kind of skirting over is the universal charitable deduction for non-itemizers. Why is that important? It seems so minimal. So what that is now taxpayers who, even if they do not itemize, can claim a universal deduction of up to $1,000 for individuals and $2,000 for married couples. This is estimated to generate up to $74 billion over 10 years for nonprofits. It originally started out as a $300 above the line deduction, and then in the Senate version of the bill, it was raised to $2,000 for married couples. Now, what is this? This means that your young taxpayers who can't itemize, maybe they don't have home mortgage interest, they don't have state taxes, they're able to give $1,000 as a single taxpayer, and they still get a deduction for that. Whereas before they had to be able to itemize in order to get a deduction for charitable contributions. So this is a good way to reach out to your young, and I say young, I mean it affects older people too. So your older givers who may have already paid their house off, may not have as high of property taxes as they once did. This is good to go for everybody. I've heard a lot of nonprofits who are marketing on this in their social media, like, hey, don't forget that you can get a deduction dollar for dollar on your tax return above the line. You do not have to itemize. And they're expecting it to generate quite a bit of money. Next would be the 0.5% floor on itemized charitable deductions. This is going to impact the higher income donors that where they're restructuring their giving. So I've had a lot of our high net worth donors who have come to us with a need of planning information for their donations for this year. So an itemized taxpayer must exceed now 0.5% threshold of their adjusted gross income before charitable contributions become deductible. It's similar to what we've all experienced ourselves individually, as if we are to take medical deductions as an itemized expense, it has to cover 7.5% of your AGI before you can take that deduction. Many of us end up not being able to take any of our medical expenses unless we've had a major medical event or a surgery. Now we have thresholds for charitable contributions as well, where we've not had that in the past. So this year, this goes into effect in 2026. This year for 2025, is a big year because a lot of donors are going to want to go ahead and stack their contributions in order to get more of a bang for their buck. Because not only is this threshold going into effect in 2026, but we're going to have some lower tax rates for some taxpayers. And so they're going to be able to take have a greater tax benefit by giving this year. So this is a year to push on your donors to ask for those big dollars because they're ready. This is a tax benefit and they're ready to give. You're going to see a lot of donor advice funds being started or being invested in because this is a way for donors to donate one time at a higher tax rate and without a threshold limitation. And now they can take that deduction in 2025 and potentially carry that forward to future years. But a impact that's going to be negative to nonprofits is this could affect charitable giving next year and in future years, because if you've got a donor who would have historically given $100,000 a year, they may have stacked that and given $500,000 in 2025, and now they're giving nothing in 2026. And so you want to make sure that you're talking with your donors, that you have a good relationship with them, and that they're considering you and your nonprofit in their donor advice funds, if that's the path that they're going. There's also now a threshold on corporate charitable deductions. So now corporations can only deduct 1%, any contributions that exceed 1% of taxable income. Now it's a limited 5-year carry forward for excess contributions. So what that means is that these small to mid-sized businesses, they were already scaling back their philanthropic efforts. And now they may scale back even more because they can't get as great of a donation, or excuse me, as great of a deduction for their donation. And that's going to affect nonprofits who rely on corporate sponsorships as partners, because historically that's been a tax benefit for them. And now they need to go in a different direction and make sure that those corporations see the benefit of benefiting of supporting their nonprofit despite the threshold. So again, it goes back to relationships. Sponsorships are considered donations to them and deductible to them. So that's where those 1%, even a sponsorship, is going to be limited as a charitable donation. Another this is a very direct, one of the nonprofit provisions that directly impacts, and that's the excise tax on executive compensation. We actually already had this regulation. It's a 21% excise tax on executive compensation over $1 million. But historically in the law, it's just the top 5 employees, officers, whoever that makes over $1 million that this would be applicable to. Where this affects nonprofits is that seems like, who is making $1 million? Well, a lot of nonprofit hospitals, a lot of nonprofit universities and other large organizations are making over $1 million. And before, in the rule before that was in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017, it was medical professionals and university governmental entities were exempt from this rule. However, there has been we are assuming that that is still the case, but there has been no information put out, no FAQs or guidance from the IRS as to whether or not medical professionals or governmental entities are exempt from this. This could very directly impact large nonprofits, especially, like I said, in hospitals, education, and this may cause them to restructure their entire compensation packages. So just keep an eye out for that. We are keeping our eye out for it. With the government shutdown, there has been, as you know, there was very little guidance put out for anything. So as of now, we are having to assume that the previous law is still, the exceptions are still in place. There's also now a tiered excise tax on college endowments, and that is for nonprofit colleges and universities that have over 3,000 tuition-paying students. They now are going to have a tiered excise tax on investment income for their endowments. The tier is between $500,000 and $750,000 per student. It's going to be 1.4% of their investment income will be taxed. Well, excuse me, their investment income will be taxed at 1.4%. Anything up to 2 million will be at 4%, and then anything over 2 million will be at 8%. This is actually, while it is significantly impactful for some universities, it is it's foreseen as a revenue producing item in this bill, but also it's kind of a good thing because it will reduce some of this large endowment income that is limiting grant making and financial support. So sometimes we're letting these universities are letting this income just grow and grow and grow and grow. And now it's going to encourage them to spend and create more grant opportunities and scholarship programs. But that tax will become a burden as well. So there's also a credit for scholarship contributions. So donors can receive, this is an individual regulation, donors can receive a non-refundable tax credit of up to $1,700 for contributions to qualified scholarship granting organizations. And any unused credits can be carried forward for 5 years. So this has been a regulation for a while, a benefit for a while in many states. Georgia is one, and also Alabama is one, and some of the southern states, but it's been on a state by state basis. This is now a federal regulation, which is really great. And this is impactful for educational nonprofits that may benefit from increased donations, and donors are going to be shifting their mindset. Right now they're being thresholded to death, and they're going to be thinking, how can I maximize credits and other things as opposed to deductions, because those deductions are being limited. The estate and lifetime gift tax exemption was permanently extended to 15 million for individuals, which will be indexed for inflation. That was a huge win, because that ended the constant worry of, because this was permanent, the constant worry of taxpayers of what does the cliff look like for estate tax planning and gifting. This is going to cause fewer estates to be subject to tax, and it will potentially, where it's going to affect us, it's going to potentially reduce charitable bequests made for tax planning purposes. That if, as long as you're working with your donors and your relationship with your donors, and reminding them how beneficial it can still be to make a charitable bequest, I feel like this is really not going to be as negatively impactful as it could be. But remember that a big tax planning idea that many have had for years and years is to give charitable bequests to offset their estate tax. Now it will be about keeping your relationship up, because that's not as beneficial as it once was. The creation of Trump accounts. This was highly anticipated and very much talked about, but the bill introduced these accounts that are tax-free savings accounts for children under 8. They can be used for education, housing, business ventures, and nonprofits can contribute to these accounts for qualified groups. So how does that matter to us? These accounts could compete with traditional nonprofit fundraising efforts, and especially those that are trying to benefit education and youth development sectors. I would recommend in those cases, those entities that are benefiting the youth of tomorrow and the youth of today that are growing in their educational backgrounds, to focus on these Trump accounts. How could you leverage that to bring in more funds to be able to give towards those Trump accounts and also give towards your mission? There were also a lot of indirect provisions that seemingly have nothing to do with nonprofits, but could trickle down and affect nonprofits as well. So the standard deduction has been permanently increased by $750 for single filers and $1,500 for joint filers. So this is going to reduce the number of taxpayers who itemize. I know a lot of even high net worth individuals who are not able to itemize anymore, because the standard deduction is just a better bet. However, remember those above the line charitable deductions that anyone can take now, that they do not have to itemize. So if they're a married couple, they can donate up to $2,000 and get a deduction for that. It's going to reduce the number of donors who benefit from the charitable deduction, and we are anticipating a lower overall giving standard going forward. There's also now a limitation on itemized deductions for high income taxpayers. So I told you they were being thresholded to death. Well, here's another one. Deduction caps have been placed for those in the 37% tax bracket, and further reduced by state and local tax deductions. There is a state and local tax deduction that has, during the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, that was cut to $10,000. Well, that was a significant cut and really broke into taxpayers itemized deductions, and a lot of people were not able to itemize anymore. Well, that has been raised to $40,000 now. However, you are capped and it phases back down pretty quickly as a high net worth individual, and even in the middle class, they're seeing a deduction phase down. And so again, that keeps people from being able to itemize, and high net worth donors may reduce or restructure their giving, which will impact capital campaigns and major gift programs. Credits for pay, family leave, and employer-provided childcare credits have been expanded, and nonprofits are excluded from claiming these credits, which could potentially create some inequities in employee benefits compared for-profit employees. I've been reading about this particularly to see if there's any, movement here, because they have put these credits into effect before and then realized, well, I like to say they realized the mistake that they made, and they come back and adjust that for nonprofits. I have not seen any changes in this particular rule as it, allowing it for nonprofits yet. But again, the government was shut down for 2 months, so they likely will revisit this at some point. There are also a lot of federal program cuts. They're reallocating funding across all of the agencies. And the way this is going to both directly and indirectly affect nonprofits is there are a lot of nonprofits who rely heavily, if not completely, on federal grants and partnerships. I know that I have a nonprofit that I know of here in Birmingham who already lost out on a $45 million grant they were expecting because of funding cuts. And I know that you're thinking about YWCAs and other YMCAs and missions that have child care offerings and child development centers where there are reductions in program cuts there, and even the SNAP benefits that I know some of those have come back, but Alabama completely cut their SNAP benefits for a while during the shutdown. But all of these are being cut back under the bill, and including Medicaid. Nonprofits may face some increased competition ultimately, or reduced availability in federal support. And those vulnerable populations are going to only increase in demand. And that's where there's a real gap is all the nonprofits are going to be fighting for the same dollars while individuals are struggling and already have limited resources, and those are going to be limited even further. So all of this, it sounds a little bit doom and gloom, but there are some really big wins for nonprofits too. We've got some ways to really be creative in how we raise funds, but to me, importantly, we dodged a lot of bullets. And I just want to take a moment to talk about what was left out of the bill, because it could have been pretty substantial. So originally, there was going to be a process to be able to revoke the tax-exempt status of a nonprofit without any due process. Well, what does that mean? Right now, if you lose your exempt status for any reason, you are allowed to file under a voluntary procedure with the IRS to request exempt status back. In most cases, they do give your exempt status back if you're able to prove that you're working towards it and there's good reason that you lost it, whatever the reason is. but they were going to do away with that process altogether. So you lost your exempt status. There was no way to get it back. And sometimes a way of losing your exempt status is through you haven't filed your tax returns in 3 years. Well, maybe there was a change in administration. I've seen it over and over and over again, and helped a lot of nonprofits get their exempt status back for that very reason. And sometimes you don't even realize that you didn't have it for many years. Another big one was the taxation of name and logo royalties as unrelated business income. Royalty income is excluded under specific code sections of the IRS code, and they were going to no longer allow specific royalty income to be excluded under that. So royalty income, as it stands, would be taxable at 21%. They were also going to expand the unrelated business income tax on transportation benefits. Now, they have done this once before. There is a specific fringe benefit regulation for taxable corporations that if you pay for parking or provide parking to your employees, even if you just have a large parking lot and your employees are able to park there, those corporations have to value the cost, the benefit to your employees, and that is taxed. You have to add that piece back as a fringe benefit, and that is taxable. They did that to nonprofits, and this was years ago, and they caused it to be taxable income. So I had a nonprofit that had to write a check for $190,000 for tax due to the parking they provided to their employees, which is absolutely absurd. And so they realized the error of their ways. Of course, the IRS came back and adjusted the bill and said that they would go back retroactively. So we were able to file amended returns for all of these nonprofits to be able to get their tax back. But they were without that cash then for almost 2 years before it was corrected. So thankfully, that made it back into the bill that passed the House, and thankfully the Senate caught it and took it right back out. And then also we avoided the increased excise tax on foundation investment assets. So your private foundations that are holding assets, it is currently taxed at 1.39%. That was going to be at a much higher percentage. And so you would have, most of those foundations are big givers. They give to the larger nonprofit or the public charities, the larger nonprofits. They also are very big scholarship givers, and that would have really pulled back on the giving from private foundations because the tax would have been pretty substantial to them. So the Big Beautiful Bill Act presents a lot for nonprofits. While the universal charitable deduction and scholarship tax credits offer new opportunities, the limitation on itemizing corporate deductions, expanded excise taxes, and estate tax changes may reduce your high dollar contributions and put a strain on your budgets. The other provisions, such as changes to the standard deduction and the federal funding priorities, they're going to create more complications. You guys, as a recommendation, should focus on staying informed, should adapt your fundraising strategies, and engage in advocacy to ensure that they can continue to serve their communities effectively under the new law. I'm also seeing a lot of nonprofits who are engaging in more grassroots lobbying to encourage their state senators and state legislature their House representatives to push for them and to see that some of these things will affect nonprofits in the way that they're able to give back to the community and to support those in need. So that was a lot of information. I know I went just a bit over there. I would love to take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Megan. That was a lot of information, yes. And actually, I have sat in on a few of these similar conversations, but you always learn something new, and you're always processing and putting into place exactly how that might impact you and how you might consider mitigating and or, sort of addressing some of the concerns. There was a question, at least one in the chat. This goes back to I think Teresa helped me, the estate and gift tax exemption expansion, where there's, I think the lifetime gift, Megan, exemption is
Mm-hmm.
15 million for individuals and indexed for inflation. The question specifically is, remind us how this might be a win for nonprofits.
It's really not a win.
Okay.
It's more of a detriment because there a tax planning strategy we have for estate tax planning is to make charitable bequest, to write that into your estate plan to further reduce your estate taxability. And now that that's gone down, there's a less of a burden, because it was going to go up to like 33 million if this had not passed. And or go down, excuse me, I'm sorry. If now people are going to be a little less inclined to give their money away to a charity when they're not going to be as highly taxable. They have a much higher tax bracket to meet, a much higher threshold. Where you want to focus your time with your relationships is really focusing on a charitable bequest is a great way to leave a legacy with your nonprofit and with, giving as you pass. And there's still going to be large estates that do not meet this threshold, do have a taxable estate, and will need to have some tax planning strategies, which we have a huge estate group. And with the baby boomer group slowly exiting the workforce and focusing on estate planning, we are still strategizing to make a charitable charitable quest part of their estate plan.
Megan, I know this has come up with a couple of our clients where you've presented to them, but can you speak just to, I think there could be a misconception. A lot of nonprofits think that if they participate in any sort of lobbying, that they could lose their tax exempt status. Could you speak to what the protocol is in terms of what they can do, what they can't do, how much they can spend, all of that?
Yes. So it depends. You can lobby. So there are some thresholds, and I'm pulling those thresholds. I just don't want to misspeak. But you can do some direct and indirect lobbying. Indirect lobbying would just be possibly paying membership dues to an organization that's lobbying for you, to that's doing that work for you. That would be indirect. Direct lobbying would be actually participating in lobbying yourself. You have someone that you are paying on the payroll for lobbying, and the lobbying thresholds are $1 million over 5 years. So you would have to lobby quite a bit, have a lot of expenses in order to risk your exempt status. And again, that is over a 5-year period.
And while we're on that theme, advocacy versus lobbying, Megan, that's an important distinction as well.
Yes, it is, because advocacy is really different. It's really not not lobbying at all. If you are advocating for you're writing letters to your legislature, you're having discussions, that's really part of your mission and helping to further your mission, as opposed to actually going before Congress, actually making a case and performing true lobbying efforts.
Thank you for that. Often a mistaken, a myth, right?
Yes.
In the private sector. Other questions? I'm looking, scanning.
I got a question for Megan. Megan, if we need to talk offline, I'm happy to because these might get a little bit
Mhm.
complicated. I think the first one is for these endowments that are going to be, highly penalized. Is there any advantage for these colleges and universities or these scholarship funds to transfer some of those excesses to a community foundation? Um, and our community foundation is going to be held to the same, level of scrutiny, over these investments that come from educational nonprofits.
So the endowments are, and you're talking about the investments on the endowments, correct?
Correct.
So
Yes.
the university endowments, it's really specific to universities. So if
Okay.
a community foundation has an endowment, we do not, as it stands right now, you are not affected. Your endowment investment income will not be affected, or not be taxed, excuse me. Originally, before the draft that passed the House originally, all endowments were included in that. So every nonprofit was included in their endowments. So I can't say with certainty that every organization would not have their endowments pulled in. The problem with university endowments and being able to convert any of that money over to a community foundation or another organization is that's not part of their mission. Those
Okay.
endowments are typically permanent or quasi permanent or directed by the board, but almost always those endowments have been created for the benefit of scholarships, for the benefits of students, for the benefits of maybe an athletic group, typically not, but the only, even if they were able to move those out into another organization to benefit, it has to be for the benefit of the students,
Hmm.
and it has to be for this specific endowed purpose, and it's still not going to help them avoid that tax because the income still hits their books first. So they're still going
Got
to
it.
have the investment income, and the grant could kind of, it wouldn't even be able to offset it in the way they've set the law. So they've kind of trapped them a little bit.
Gotcha. And then my second question is around the Trump fund that could be
Mm-hmm.
a competitor, to nonprofits. Would that
Mm-hmm.
would a donor have to open up a separate fund for every child, or could it be for a cohort or programmatically built funds built up for a cohort or cause?
And then who
It's
controls that? Who controls the fund?
Right.
it's our understanding that it's supposed to be set up for per child, that it's by child. But again, there hasn't been a ton of guidance issued yet on this. And so to your second question is who controls it?
Mm.
The where that gets to is what we're not saying is who controls it if the guardian is not of in the has the does not have the ability to control that. Those are questions we are looking at ourselves because those things have not been um, we've not had a lot of guidance put out or FAQs on that because what does happen when you've got a child in need that a nonprofit can contribute to? Where do the funds go? But that is a great question, and we will continue to look at that and put the things out on that.
Megan,
Um,
I just want to thank you.
yeah.
I've heard many of these, but this was broken down in a way, at least for me, that has been very, very powerful because it's generally been over my head in some ways, but I will tell you that you've broken this information down in a way that's very, very conversational.
Well, thank you. And I hope that if you guys have any questions, you can reach out, afterwards because I'll tell you, even in our we had a one big beautiful webinar that was incredible. I encourage you to all look at it and watch it. But even then they skirted over the nonprofit section because everybody is doing that because it seems like it's this big in the bill and that it seems like it's not important. But as you can see, there are a lot of things that are going to directly affect us, and that we've got to change our entire way of functioning to avoid just completely being without funding altogether.
And to your point, yeah, I would like to echo DePriest, of course, Megan, and say thank you, and also to Kim for making the connection for us. But we're
Very
already
much so.
feeling this in the community. You know, cutbacks and changing priorities that affected this community started in those executive orders in January. And we have felt those cascading impacts into our organizations in the community. The coalition is part of that, right? Our CDC funding and our public health funding has somehow evaporated because the priorities are no longer aligning with the work that needs to be done. But yet, and we're not isolated, right? And then also we've got rising needs in the community with a cutback on SNAP benefits, right? And so you've got increasing demand and escalating stresses on the nonprofits that are continuing to try to serve the communities that are here. So it's a very tricky situation. And I would submit that potentially this will be our new normal for at least the next 3 years. And it might be that we've kind of evolved to a new place of operating, but it's as difficult as it is. It's also a good opportunity to think about how do we operate and how can we work better together and more collaboratively and partner, because it's just going to be a challenge, I think, for the next 2 to 3 years for sure.
And Renee, I just put a little link. We have
Excellent.
A link if you want to sign up. We get anytime tax changes happen, we send out tax alerts, or if we have continuing education classes like this that you can join for a webinar. So if anyone would like to do that, they're welcome to do that.
All right, folks, you can grab it in the chat. Okay, a final thank you for you guys. You're welcome to stay on, but I would like to kind of pause and see if there are general announcements for the crew. Kim's out. Tapping out. Bye, Kim. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
Megan.
I appreciate you.